the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be in my mouth. Now I'm reminded by the saints of old, when they said when praises go up, surely blessings will come down. Now FIP is going to tell you how to get your blessings by any means necessary.
Don't have time to play. Receive my blessing by any means necessary. Every time I worship him and praise him, I tell him he's wonderful and awesome. Showers of blessing begin to fall. He's blessing me right now and he's not down. Don't have time to play.
Also says, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Why don't you help us right here? Lift up the name of Jesus.
Lift him up. Woo! Lift him up. Lift him up. Lift him up. By any means. You want to lift him. You want to lift him up. You want to praise his name. By any means. Lift him up.
everybody. Welcome tonight to the Catalyst Agency show. On tonight, we're pastoring through this pandemic. I'm excited to have you a part of the show on this week. Do me a favor, real quickly, make sure you share this. Get this message out. We got some great guests on tonight. We got Pastor Theron Jackson from Shreveport, Pastor Ricky Carter from Lafayette, Pastor Charles Bond from Kansas City, and also we got the Chief of Police all the way from Baltimore, Maryland. This show, it's going to be powerful, it's going to be epic, and you don't want to miss anything from this show on tonight. So I need you to real quickly make sure you share this broadcast. Make sure you start your own watch party. Tell your neighbor, your auntie, your uncle, somebody that the Catalyst Age is on tonight, and we're going to give you some powerful information that's going to help shift and transform your life. So I'm excited tonight with my first guest. Listen, we're going to get right into it. He's a friend, a brother, all the way from Shreveport, Louisiana. He now pastors the Morning Star Baptist Church. Former pastor, Dr. M.L. Hunt, who licensed me to preach. Can you help me tonight celebrate Pastor Theron Jackson? Pastor Jackson, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much. Glad to be with you tonight.
Man, good. Excited to have you a part of the show. Talk to us a little bit tell us about Pastor Theron Jackson and the Morning Star Baptist Church. Talk about some things you all are doing in the community there.
Well, listen, man, this has been a wonderful opportunity. I just want to say thank you to you for the invitation to even be with you tonight and to share this opportunity with the other brothers who are on here as well. When it comes to us at Morning Star, we're no different probably than a lot of others in the sense that we are pastoring through this pandemic. We're journeying through this wilderness of uncertainty, but we are doing it with God. We know that God is with us. And so as a result, I just want to say that it gives us an opportunity to not be people who are victims of the edifice complex where we got to be in a building to be the people of God. And so what God has done for us is allowed us to know that if I take you out of the building, it's because I'm trying to keep you in the community. And as a result, man, we have done some things in our community. We are now working. Tomorrow happens to be our deadline, man. We have put out there what we call a STAR grant for our community. We are giving folks who live in the Moortown community around our church grants up to $500 for families in our community who need help right now. It's our own hood stimulus package, if you will, man. So we've been blessed to be able to recognize that God has given us a responsibility through this time that as we traffic through, everybody's not as confident as we are because we are anchored in a God who never leaves nor forsakes us. Not everybody has that same confidence. And so we have been able to try to make sure we reach out. We've been feeding every Saturday as usual. Nothing has changed during this pandemic. Today, had 170 people tested on our campus today for COVID-19. Man, so just trying to be the church.
That's wonderful, Pastor, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing such wonderful and marvelous things in your community. Because the good news is that people need to hear that even though the doors are closed, the church is still fully functioning.
Absolutely,
and it's great to hear that God is still blessing you all to be able to continue to do that. So, with that being said, what have you found? And I ask each and every guest each week to be transparent. What are some things you found that have been challenging for you and your ministry during this pandemic?
Well, I think part of the reality and the truth is that we are, as we traffic through this season of uncertainty, and we all have some mental health challenges that folks have in physical health challenges. We also, man, isolation is not natural. To be separate from people, we are community by nature, and as a result of being people of community by nature, we want to be together. God has created us for reciprocity, and the lack of reciprocity does something to the human psyche. And so I think for one of the things we've been doing is every Wednesday at noon, we have what we call Wellness Wednesday. We have a medical doctor. I think Dr. Lynch was on with you last week, Dr. Grimes, I should say. And then we have a counselor who's on every Wednesday. And we try to keep talking about things that are, because depression is real, this isolation, alienation, separation, all of those things cause problems for us sometimes. And so just trying to make sure that we stay both physically and mentally healthy during this time, man. Folks are sitting around home right now and we're getting this corona fat, because we've been out I mean, from away from our normal lifestyles. And so, man, the natural proclivity of people as we sit at home is to eat, to drink. They're going to be people who make this transition tough. And they're going to be, I mean, alcoholism is going to be a real deal because people are staying inside. And so we've been just trying to deal with the challenges that come in. And because you're called by God and because you're saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, doesn't mean you don't have those same mental health challenges. And so we got to stay healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually.
And I'm thank you for touching on that because that's one of that's one of the subjects that's really close to my heart because after battling with depression at some time, and I think that in the church we've been taught how to shout and jump and dance, but we haven't taught how to deal with the mental health piece. And with that being said, take it personal for a moment. What are some things you've learned about Pastor TJ? Because I do know during this time when pastors are often busy and they're constantly going, and now you're at home. For me, I might get on my wife's nerves, every now and then, but now I'm home all the time. It could be every day. And some things you've learned about yourself. What are some things you learned about yourself during this pandemic?
Well, I think one of the things that we're so often needed by people, that sometimes we forget the people who we need as well. And so I'm grateful that, my kids are home and I get to be at home. But, because of what I do every day, I do a radio show 5 days a week, trying to keep the community involved, informed, I should say. And because it was seen that what we do is essential, I haven't been able to not do that. And so I've been having to work through those kind of things. But it keeps people on top of what's happening around them to give them some ideas of what's going on so they can have a different perspective of it. But I think for me, I would say I'm challenged again to keep myself physically and one of the good things that's happened, man. I'm as spiritually sharp as I've ever been. I pray at 6 a.m. every day. I lead a group in prayer at 6 a.m. every day. They pray at 8 p.m. at night. I do Bible study every day, Monday through Friday from 12 to 1 every day. And so I have been able, my spiritual acuity, my mental acuity as it relates to Bible study and teaching has stayed sharp during this time. I've been able to keep my hands on people, man. We have Zoom everything, man. We zoomed out almost. We have Zoom Sunday school, Zoom Bible study. I do Bible study on Wednesday evenings at 6 via Facebook Live. We on every day. And on Sundays, man, we live stream at 8 and 11. I'm on 3 radio stations at 10, on television at 10:30. And so, man, we trying to do it all to stay in the spaces to be who we are supposed to be from a spiritual perspective, but also keep our hands on people every day, man. So had a cabinet meeting this morning with some of my leaders, a staff meeting with some of my leaders, and man, we just continue to, I'm busier now than I have been. So I said to our church, in a meeting, and it may have been Sunday school, or I don't remember what kind of class, that as soon as this pandemic is over, it's going to sound strange, but as soon as this pandemic is over and we can find a way, and I don't know that it'll be over, but as we transition to some normalcy or new normalcy, that the pastor's going to be on sabbatical for a while, because I have worked harder in the last 2 months than I had in the last 2 years, it seems like, prior to that. But God is blessing as a result of our church is strong now, or maybe even stronger than she's ever been. And so I'm grateful for that.
Well, man, and that's good that you're constantly engaged with your people, and I think that's vitally important for each pastor to stay engaged with their people to make sure that they continue to touch them in that pastor role. And I want to ask you a question now because I really, I'm excited to have such bright minds on tonight, and this is one question I know I'm going to ask each and every one of you. There's this thought or this dynamic that there is a separation between preaching and pastoring. And I want to ask you and get your thoughts about it. Do you think it's possible to be a great preacher and not a great pastor? Do you think it's possible to be a great pastor and not a great preacher? Or do you think both of them have to go hand in hand? Because I was listening to some things I saw on social media, man, and how a pastor, a couple of weeks ago got fired during the pandemic.
Yeah,
that's mind blowing to me. But talk about that for a moment. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that the giftedness or the gifting to do both are not mutually inclusive. I don't think everybody who can preach will be a great pastor. And it's not prerequisite that every pastor is a great preacher. It was the great mystic from Morehouse, who Howard Thurman, who once said that no preacher is ever under an obligation to preach a great sermon, but every preacher is under an obligation to wrestle with a great thought. So the idea that a pastor could be wrestling with a great thought, but not have Charles Bond or Ricky Carter capacity to deliver in the way that they do. I don't have the native and supernatural gifts that those brothers have. I have to work hard to preach, but I think I work hard in a leadership perspective as well and capacity. So I really try to make sure that as I lead the people who are part of the Church of God, I remember that I'm always trying to hone my leadership skills as well, and that I'm not doing a good job if I'm feeding the sheep, but I'm not fighting the wolves. And so God has called the shepherd to a twofold capacity as relates to pastoring. So it's not only my role to feed the sheep, but also have to be active in fighting the wolves. And the wolves sometimes are down in City Hall, sometimes they're in the State House, other times they're in the White House. Whatever they are, they have to be fought for the protection of the sheep.
Man, that's awesome response. So as we get ready to close this segment out, I want to ask you this question because I think it's in Louisiana,
Sure.
with the everything opening back up at this point to a point. We're in phase 1 right now, and I think it's a critical season right now for every pastor. I was on a phone call just a little bit earlier today, and the struggle is, should I go back and should I not?
Wow.
And having to make a choice between finances and people's lives. And for me personally, I don't like it when we have to downplay, because both of them are real and real decisions. And so what are 2 or 3 things, as we close out this segment, what are 2 or 3 things that every pastor should be saying to their people, whether it's in the church physically or whether it be virtually?
Well, here's what I would say, and here's what I say to my church, that you got to be careful because prior to the disaggregation of the data, everybody was afraid. When they found out it was happening to Black people, what it was happening to others, then all of a sudden nobody was afraid anymore because it's y'all and not us. And all of a sudden, as usual, we become the sacrificial lamb on the altar of capitalism. And so I would say to our people that you got to be careful, look out for folks. I think it was Michael Jackson who had a song to say they don't really care about us. At the end of the day, we have to care about us. And so we have to make wise decisions and make sure our decisions are in our best interest. We have to be very careful that we understand that nothing has changed in 3 months, that 94,000 people have died in the United States, which is more than, and that's in 3 months. And that's more than the number of people who died in Vietnam in 20 years. At the end of the day, we got to remember this is serious and it's impacting us in a unique way. So I want everybody to remember that there's a difference between an invitation and a lure. A lure, I was sharing with a pastor this morning that I don't fish, but for those who fish, you can appreciate what a lure is. And I said to them, be careful going back out into the world, because every fish before he got caught thought he was going to have lunch. Every fish simply thought he was about to have something to eat, never thinking he was about to become something to eat. So we got to be careful that every invitation back out is not necessarily an invitation, as much as it could be a lure. And we have to be sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Listen, we are people of community. The tragedy is this virus is spreading community, which means we're going to have to separate ourselves for a little while. That, hey, I had to hug my mother virtually this year for Mother's Day. We're going to have to barbecue in our own backyard for Memorial Day. We got to stay apart right now so that we can come together later on. And we got to be wise enough to know that we can still be the church without being the church. Without being at the church, because the church is not the building. Don't you suffer from an edifice complex. Know that we serve a God who is not a temple God, but who is a tabernacling God. And in the words of the prophet whose name was Ludacris, when we move, God moves, just like that.
Man, thank you so much for enlightening us on the prophet of Ludacris. Man, listen, thank you so much, Pastor Darren Jackson, who I affectionately, my brother I call TJ, and I thank you so much. I thank you for the work that you're doing in the Shreveport community, Morning Star Baptist Church. You're doing a great job. My mother-in-law, she says you're doing a good job. Keep it up. So she's a member. So keep it up, man. So listen, y'all, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial. Do me a favor. Make sure you like this. You share this. Tell somebody. We got some powerful preachers and some great activists that are on tonight that's going to give you some bright information. So we'll be right back after this commercial.
My name is Jessica Latin, and I am the owner of JL Counseling. I provide individual counseling, family counseling, and group counseling, and I cover a variety of topics, including grief counseling, anger management, depression, and anxiety. Domestic violence and maternal mental health are two topics that are very near and dear to my heart, and there is a lack of services here in our community, and that is why I chose to specialize in those two areas. There is a huge stigma surrounding mental health these days, and I really want to be a beacon of light in this community to show everyone that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. My favorite part about the counseling process is watching my clients achieve their goals and seeing the smile on their faces and the change in their attitude really helps me to realize this is why I became a counselor.
Thank you so much for staying tuned in. Remember, like this, share this. Let's get this broadcast out to the world so we can make sure that we are continuing to impact the lives of believers. So listen, you all, we've left Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana, and now we're getting ready to go all the way to Kansas City to a friend and to a brother. Let me tell you something. He's a preacher's preacher, a great man, great spirit, humble spirit, and I'm excited to have him on tonight. Can you help me welcome Pastor Charles Bond? Pastor Bond, how are you, sir?
Rabbi, I'm good, man. I'm amazing.
Yeah, you
I
go
don't
with
mean
that
no
rabbi.
harm after Pastor Jackson died. I just think I want to go join his church. We ain't doing nothing.
Listen, I strategically got some of the brightest minds on tonight. So I'm telling you, if nothing else, preachers, you need to tune in tonight. I'm telling you, share this broadcast. You're going to hear some stuff that's going to blow your mind. So listen, Pastor Bond, tell us a little bit about yourself and your transition to Kansas City from Memphis, Tennessee. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me on, and I'll say this as expeditiously as possible. I've been preaching for 32 years, pastoring for greater 25 years. My first churches were in Mississippi. Then I went on to Columbus, Ohio for 13 years, and then I went home to Memphis, where I was senior minister on staff, executive pastor for Dr. Frank Ray for 3 years. 3 years. And then after that, I transitioned to the wonderful people here at the Mount Pleasant Church in Kansas City, Missouri.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome, Doc. You've done some traveling, man, but you are one of the preachers. And so I want you tonight to talk about during this time in this space for so many pastors, they're struggling. They're struggling mentally because, and not just, and Pastor Jackson alluded earlier to the fact of them having to deal with the mental health piece, but then some of them are struggling about, what do I do? What decision do I make? Some of them are even afraid if I make the wrong decision, it can set my church back 10, 15 years. The truth be told, I'm already hanging on by a thread. Talk about what are some things that some pastors may be able to do or you can just encourage them to keep hanging on in there.
Man, thank you. That's a great question. First of all, every preacher, pastor out there have to remember that we've been sanctioned, called, and sent by God. So he is the one that's responsible for doing the assigning, for doing the keeping, and for doing the upkeeping of his church, his bride. Don't get married to your church. When you get married to your ministry, you're committing spiritual adultery. Have some balance. Don't take yourself too serious. And what I mean by that is the church is his bride and not ours. I never will forget it being in a think tank session one time. And we have to be encouraged that we are fighting in the best army on the planet. And we're fighting for the best commander in chief. But we cannot sell ourselves short. Have confidence. Be confident in what you're doing, that the Holy Spirit will lead you, guide you, and keep you. Let me say this directly. The Black church has to remain the catalyst in our communities. There was a time when the Black church was the battleship that got us through all of our movements. It got us through Jim Crow, through slavery, through civil rights, through affirmative action. And the Black church was the battleship, and the captain was the Black pastor was the captain on the battleship. But now Black pastors, as of this recent age, stop being the captain on the battleship and start being the entertainment director on the cruise ship. So what has happened is God.
Doc, stop. You got to say that one more time, Doc. That blessed my soul right there.
The Black pastor we were the captains on the battleship to lead our people through all of our movements. You know, that Dr. King and all those historians, they launched these movements for civil rights marches out of the Black church. Now we making $3 above our bus fare, and this new Black Christian that became woke all of a sudden. So we flee the Black churches, go to the suburbs, and I'm not complaining. What I'm saying is that we can't ever forsake the Black church, because the Black church was the battleship that got us through our movements. The pastor was the captain of that battleship, but now we want preachers to be entertainment directors on cruise ships. So now, if I'll say it this way, Pastor Ken, on Easter Sunday was the Sunday, or was thereabouts a few weeks before there, when they had started the stay-at-home orders mid-March here in Missouri. They started the stay-at-home orders right in the middle of my installations. So we had to make a transition. My church previously did not have the technology. When I got there, not to no pun intended against my church, wonderful people, but they still had a VHS recorder in the tech room.
Oh, Lord,
and so I had to push. I only been here 8 months, so I had to push for technology and, prioritize, getting the congregation healthy. We moved to technology. Thank God we got the technology installed to be able to make that curve. But what I preached on Easter Sunday out of where they went to the tomb looking for Jesus and said, well, why are you looking for the angel? Said, why are you looking for the living among the dead? He's no longer here. And I talked about the church has left the building. And I talked about the church shares 3 things in common with professional teams and military units. We're normally compared as a church to a military unit or team. So we share 3 things in common with the teams and the military. You got to be drafted, you got to be drilled, but then you got to be deployed. Well, we've left the building only because now it's time to be deployed to show what we learned in training camp, in Sunday school, in BTU, in Vacation Bible School.
Wow, man, and that's powerful. And I think that's encouraging, because so many people, they wrestle with right now technology. Let's be honest. And I work in the school system, and I see how the inequitableness with children and internet and lack of technology at home has been, a challenge for so many parents, because they just don't have, now here was crazy. Everybody has a cell phone, but very few people have a laptop, a Chromebook, or something of that nature. And so it's only so much work you can do on a cell phone. And so during this pandemic, when you're talking about the church has left the building, talk about some things, outreach. What are some things that your church is doing, and you as the pastor, you are continuing to keep that touch? Because I think as pastors, to me, in my opinion, a real pastor should leave every Sunday, every Wednesday, smelling like sheep.
That's right.
You should be able to touch your sheep. And so talk about what are some things you're doing to stay in contact and keep that touch with your members.
Okay, thank you, Pastor. Great question. First of all, I teach our people that we're corona conscious, but not corona controlled. So we're using wisdom in how we operate. Of course, we're doing live stream, we're doing Facebook, we're doing all that. And we've done some parking lot services with the social distancing piece. But one of the things in particular that we're doing is, we're calling our people. We send out call blast every week. I'm calling members individual as I get to my list and can do it, things of that nature, the common touch, going back to the common touch. Now, of course, you might not call everybody, you might miss some, because you got to do this all in moderation, do it. But as you say, we ought to be smelling like sheep. One of the things that I found in particular, also we've done well, and just a sidebar now to the members, not that the sheep aren't the focal point, but we've also made it our business, although, this has been some of our lowest giving times across the board compared to when we were coming there, per se. We've been trying to bless other ministries. We've sown into several pastors. Our church is kind of literally tithed off of what God gave us in the other ministers, pastors, struggling churches. I mean, we find out who's really in need, or church planters who mostly they're funding their own piece and whatever. And we've been sending out resources to help ministries that have been kind of struggling in this time, just as Doc say, our own little stimulus package, Now, I'm joining Pastor Jackson Church because they testing for everything and giving out food and $500 a week. Maybe I'm doing this wrong, so I need to go sign up for the seminary. He talking about preaching. Look, that's only a piece of it, Doc. Let's trade if that's the case. But being that common touch, also, we're getting ready. We just got approved. Of course, now some of this stuff, is like he said, you got to fight for the sheep. And so I've been meeting with the state representative, different people. So we just got approved this week to be a testing site for the COVID-19, a free testing site for our particular zip code. We in the hood. And so it's free to our members and anybody that want to come, but especially those in 64127, been fighting hard for that. Also, definitely fighting to get programs in place to brace for this summer, where if it's nothing but the kids, make sure these kids get a meal, make sure, when they pull up, we can go put groceries in their trunk. You ain't got to get out of your car, partnering with different community organizations to make sure that we're doing what we can to serve the people we've been sent to serve.
Man, that's phenomenal. And I think that's, let me tell you something, man. I am, if nobody else does, I'll tell you thank you. Just as you and Pastor Jackson are doing some wonderful, marvelous things. Here is what I think is a blessing. And I'm glad God has given me the opportunity. Last week we had over 3,000 people view our broadcast. Wow. And I'm thank God for allowing me to have this space and create this space for pastors to come on, because oftentimes during a crisis, the first thing people say is, where's the church? And I want to make sure that pastors who are having character and integrity, they're concerned about the sheep, and they make sure that they're getting information and resources out there to the people. Because the reality of the fact is, you finances are low for everybody. And the fact that God is placed on your heart and you're still trying to be a blessing to God's people, I just believe the Bible teaches us whatsoever man soweth that shall he also reap. And I'm eternally grateful for you and for that. So just as we get ready to close out this segment, I want you just to talk about for a moment, what do you think church will look like when we return? Because for some people, I know it's going to be different for everybody. Mm-hmm. Because there's no church the same. You talk about budget, you talk about congregation, member size, and things of that nature, your community involvement. It's so many different factors. But when we're talking about social distancing, because I'm excited to have the chief police coming up next, and we're going to talk about that because, social distancing affects everybody. Yes. And so for 1 or 2 minutes, share with me, what are some strategies that you may have thought about, you may have to put in place that maybe can encourage some other pastor for when they return to the building?
Okay. Number one, when you say encourage pastors and they get ready to go back to the building, the first thing I want pastors to do is please, by all means, take care of yourself. Don't overdo it. Don't overstress it. Don't overthink it. And I'm going to tell you why I say that, man. It's impossible to pour from an empty container.
Wow.
Sometimes the tow truck needs a tow truck. So first, number one, Pastor, take care of yourself. We got to remember, Pastor Ken, that the church belongs to the Lord, man. I mean, I know what that is to burn out and be depressed and think I had leave thinking I hadn't done enough or beat myself up because I felt like I failed God. That is not relationship. So I just want to say that foremost. I know that ain't what you asked, but I had to say that because it started with the shepherd. The second thing is, as far as this new normal, quote unquote, that we mentioned, one of the things that we particularly are doing, we ordered the commercial hands-free sanitizer units to go all over the place. When everybody walks through our doors, they'll get a mask, and we're going to enforce this no hug, no handshake zone thing. But one of the things that we're going to do, talk to our musicians, we might have to go to a second service, early 2 services to make sure people can spread out and be safe and feel comfortable, because no shepherd in his right mind would put sheep in harm's way. So we're going to do what we have to do until we can do what we want to do. But the main thing we got to do is use wisdom in this whole movement. Not like you said, not they opening. What good is an open economy to a dead body? Wow. And so we have to be very conscious and very intentional about doing what we can. We can't control what people bring into the building, but we can control that our spaces are safe and clean. One pastor told me in Mississippi, a buddy friend of mine said, man, look, when they first did the stay-at-home order, of course, we wasn't just building junkies, but we out in the rural, all our people don't have signals and, Facebook Lives and all that stuff. He said, so what we did was, my wife is a human resource person. We pulled the governor's rules down from the internet, the CDC stuff. We picked it apart line upon line with our team, and we figured out a creative way to do gatherings. So we had all these 38 classrooms and spaces in our church. We just social distance 6 feet apart and put 10 people in each room and put monitors up. And still having church because all our people were not tech savvy. So we have to be creative. We have to be safe. We have to be sanitized. We have to practice social distance in this new term. But we also have to remember that we're faith people, not foolish faith, but faith people who are still doing what we have to do until we can do what we want to do, trusting God and understanding that even as we walk in wisdom, because this is still a very deadly and dangerous disease. So I don't want us to be fooled. However, but as we walk in wisdom, we still got to trust God. See, the problem with faith, Pastor Ken, and I digress, the problem with faith is handicapped because it's blind.
Wow. Talk, man. Talk.
The cerebral advantage that we have about a storm that makes storms bearable for believers is when we go into it, we know he's going to bring us out of it. That's the cerebral advantage we have as believers.
Wow.
So he's bringing us out of this, whether it was God allowed or God arranged, whether COVID was a gut check for the globe to get out. Whenever God doesn't have your attention, he disturbs what does.
Man, listen, that, wow, that, you done messed me up. I forgot what I was getting ready to do now. All right, so I think we get ready to go. We're going to come back.
I'm going to go join Pastor Jackson Church. That's what I'm going to go do.
But listen, man, I thank you for the information you shared. Yes. Let me tell you something. That blew me away just now when you talked about, man, I wish that pastor had an opportunity to get the information out. The fact that you got all those classrooms and you can still have church and worship and people can still have social distancing and that's a
and to
great
date, nobody
idea.
got sick. To date, nobody got sick. Nobody's got the COVID. They just said, you have to be creative and interpret. He said they called the police and told the police to come down there and take a look what they're doing. The police said, we ain't going to bother y'all because y'all are abiding. You just doing it creatively the way you have to do it.
Man, I think that's awesome, and I'm glad the information we have to share. So listen, you all, we get ready to go to commercial. Thank you, Pastor Bond. He's not going
And
anywhere.
any pastor that needs to talk to me, pastor, give them my email address, whatever, my number, tell them they can call you, call me. We got to be here for each other. This ain't no time to be no big shots.
I appreciate that so much, and I thank you for your humility and your willingness to be a part of that. Let me tell you something.
Thank you for having me on.
I'm going to take that idea and share that with some of my clients and the pastors because that can help them get back into the building safely. So listen, you all, we're going to come back. You hear it's getting better and better and better. Pastor Jackson then messed us up. Pastor Bond then messed us up. Now listen, you all, we get ready to go to Baltimore, Maryland in just a second, you all. We get ready to go to Baltimore, Maryland. And here's what I'm going to do because I want to be cognitive of people's time. I'm going to forego our commercial right now. So Pastor Bond, Thank you so much.
Bless
But
you,
listen,
sir. I
go
love
on
you a lot.
backstage. Come on
Okay.
back, because we're gonna bring you back up in a minute. All right.
Okay.
So right now, listen, y'all. I'm getting ready to go. I'm getting ready to go to all the way to Baltimore, Maryland. Now I can tell you, I can take privilege here because this is my cousin, my beloved cousin. And I can tell y'all some of the stuff he used to do me when I was little, but that's all right. This is my show, and I got the mic. All right. So, but listen, I am one of those cousins that is godly proud of him because he's a man of faith, a man of integrity. He loves his wife, honors her, has beautiful children. Thank God to his son, Lil Mike, which is my godchild. Shout out to him, who also had wrestled with COVID-19, but God has brought him through. And so I wanted to do something different this week. I wanted to bring on, because I've had doctors on, but this police community, I think we need to address that issue. So can you all help me welcome my cousin? I was getting ready to say pastor, but Michael, I'm gonna say his whole name and get me in trouble too. Michael Sean Harrison. Mike, welcome, Chief. I'm sorry, Chief Michael Sean Harrison.
Hey,
how are you, man?
Man, I'm good. It is good to see you, Pastor Ken. But it's always Mike. You ain't never got to call me Chief. It's always going to be just Mike, man.
Yeah, man. So talk to us a little bit. Talk to us about what is life like in Baltimore since all of this has transpired.
Well, first of all, Baltimore is it's a beautiful place, man. We've been here now a little bit over a year, and it's a tough place. It's been through some tough situations. Let me take this off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's been through some tough situations, and it has a real bad, opioid epidemic here. There's a big poverty issue here. There's a major housing crisis. So there are a number of things that are here. But what brought me here is I was recruited to come here to be the police chief after being the police chief in New Orleans for 4.5 years. And the police department's under a consent decree because of bad practices and things that were done over the years that put them in a consent decree. It's now the government's responsibility, along with me as the chief now, to transform that department into the kind of department the citizens really want, deserve, and pay for. And so we're dealing with all of these social issues in a densely populated city. And now we get hit with COVID, which has exposed more so than in anything ever how bad the situation really was. And so now we're dealing with a lot of things. Man, I was blessed by Pastor Jackson and Pastor Bond. They taught me a lot. I'm gonna go to work tomorrow sounding so smart, but it is. I'm gonna sound smart tomorrow, man. They gotta know I'm gonna use that, man. But people say we're here to serve and protect. We'll protect and serve. It was originally serve and protect, and it got translated and inverted to protect and serve. I think God has us here to really teach us what service is all about. Because just like pastors, we're doing things very differently, and we had to adapt and evolve instantly on how we did things. And now we have to do more serving, as much serving, if not more serving, than protecting, because what people need from us is not just to go out there and catch a criminal. They need us to actually serve them. So we have officers out there delivering food, delivering masks, delivering hand sanitizer, helping people get from point A to point B, and just dealing with the same issues that our pastors are dealing with, because now there's not much difference in what we do because it's affecting us all. I've had 45 people infected with COVID-19 in my department alone, and we lost somebody, so we're dealing with that. And just like a pastor, we have to go and do everything remotely. We have to do all of our work online and remotely on Zoom, WebEx, and whatever we're using, and social distancing from each other. And so I have to literally be at work away from everybody on my senior team so that the senior team doesn't get infected and the whole department gets shut down. So we're doing the same thing you're doing, having to find innovative ways to go out and deliver the services we're supposed to deliver. But it's really making us really think about how we serve as much as how we protect.
And I think there's some good information that we need to hear, because many people need to know that, and I will say this as, selfish, claim myself. I don't think all police are bad, and I think they need to hear that going through this pandemic, that you all are doing some work, in the community. So when you're talking about, and I was going to another question, but you brought up something I kind of wanted to let you expound on a little bit. You talked about how you have 45 of your workers exposed to the virus. Talk about what that looks like for the police department. Social distancing. How does that? I'm trying to think in my mind if the cop stops, somebody, they can't stay 6 feet, So I mean, how does that work?
So we have to figure out, we had to do this immediately, figure out how to answer the citizens' calls, respond to the citizens' needs in a way that doesn't expose the citizen to us, because the citizen doesn't know if we're infected. We don't know if the citizen is infected. Mm-hmm. And we had to really modify how we are going to go about enforcing certain laws. Some of the stuff we just cannot do right now because it overexposes us to the unknown, and it overexposes community members to us. And let's face it, we have to go home, we have to go to the grocery store, we have to go to the doctor, and then we show up to work every day, not knowing if we contracted that disease at home and then pass it on to a citizen. So we have to be very careful. Here's what happened, man. We have, for every person that gets infected in my department, I have to quarantine the entire unit. So I had several people got infected in one district. They had 130 officers assigned to that district. I had to quarantine 130 officers for 2 weeks, and then sanitize the station, sanitize every police car, and get professional companies to do all that, get everybody tested, and slowly bring people back to work. But I had to rearrange the department to cover 130 people being away from work. And so with the department with 3,000 employees, I have 2,500 cops and 500 plus civilians. So when people become infected and we have to isolate and quarantine them and their coworkers and anybody who would have been close to them, it greatly affects the entire operation. And then we have to juggle to make it work. But guess what? The men and women of this department have stepped up to the plate. We're doing it. They're showing up to work. Everybody who has been infected, just about all of them have recovered and come back to work. And so now we only have about 11 people quarantined. And we've had about 500 people exposed to this, but only 45 people positive for COVID. And right now we only have 11 people. But it's a constant rearranging because, yes, and this is much like being a pastor, but it's 24 hours a day. It's 7 days a week. It's a night shift. It's on weekends. And we're constantly doing that. And I love what the previous two pastors said, and I forget which one said this, but the job of the police officer is to protect the citizen from those who wish to do them harm. Or some people say protect the citizen from the criminal. I don't say it like that. Protect the citizen from those who wish to do harm. But at my level, the citizens expect me to protect them from people who wish to do harm, and they expect me to protect them from the police also. So wow. I have the delicate balance of protecting citizens from criminals and citizens from police. And sometimes there's a fine line because people will step over that, cops will step over that line, and we have to deal with that. And so the police department looks to its leader like a police chief, much like your members look to you as a pastor. But the people who live in the city look to their mayor and the police chief almost like a pastor, because they're looking for you and they have expectations of us to protect them and to provide for them certain things. That's a heavy burden to carry that many people just don't really think about.
Wow. And in saying that, what is it you brought up, and I think it's very, very befitting to talk about, the mental health piece. What going through this pandemic, I'm quite sure, and please forgive my, me being a novice or not being astute in this area. I think police have to come, right? They have to. They're like nurses and doctors. They have to show up either way. And so, talk about how managing that when you got people who say, Chief, I love you, man, but I ain't coming because I can't risk. But yet, I know there's a balance there. Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, that's a culture within a police department. Yes, we are obligated to show up to work every day. There are penalties for not showing up. But what they expect is for me to provide them with the necessary equipment to keep them safe. They expect me and our department and the city to provide them with the proper masks, the gloves, gowns, the sanitizing equipment, and the training on how to keep themselves safe, and create policies and protocols that minimize exposure. And so now, many of our officers haven't been into one of the police stations in 8 weeks. They do everything from the parking lot and go straight into the car. And we're not going to the police academy. And all of our recruits are learning on the internet, and we're doing recruit training remotely. And so we have changed all of that. They expect me to provide and protect them, just like members of a congregation would expect a pastor to provide and protect. And as long as the city does its part, police will show up and they will go out and do their jobs. And, this is what we sign up for. And while many people can decide to stay home and to run away from something, that is not what we do. We run towards it, no matter what it is.
Now, and with that being said, talk about for a moment, for you, how is that the mental part for you as a chief? We talked about the officers, but talk about that. How do you find that balance? And I brought you on because I wanted people to see both sides. And we talk about the disease and how it affects everybody else, and the news is being flooded with churches not being able to go back, but we never deal with the talk about those front line workers, those police officers, nurses, and doctors who are giving their lives. But talk about how that is for you to balance, because you're a husband, you're a father, you have to come home and for the lack of a better term, this is my show, I can say it, you probably can't. Folk don't care. They don't care. They don't care about that. They just want you to do what you're assigned to do. They don't care nothing about your family. So how does that work for you mentally?
Well, I'm like you, I'm a man of faith. And my prayer life gets me through this. I have the best wife in all the world who supports me and who makes life easy for me and stressless and doesn't put any stress on me. So that's good that I'm blessed to have that kind of home life. My kids are grown, so I'm not in the raising children like you are with much younger children. Yeah. God bless you, I pray for you. But so I pray, I make sure that I stay focused, and I make sure that I vent and talk to someone. I talk to my wife a lot, and they're wise people. Just like every pastor needs a pastor, every chief needs a chief. And there are wise, mature police chiefs who are out there who are retired, who I can lean on to help me through this. Because leadership is lonely, and it's lonely. And right now, we've separated from everybody, so it's even more lonely. But I have to make sure that I am, and my family is monitoring me for the signs to make sure that depression and self-medicating and all those things we do when we get under pressure, that those things are not showing themselves. And when they do, we can fix it. I have to do the same thing with 3,000 employees. We have to watch for the signs that depression is not setting in, that they're not self-medicating, that they're not becoming abusive in their relationship. We watch for the signs, and we have people trained at multiple levels within that kind of an organization to find that and give people help and put them on the right track so we can prevent them from destroying themselves and destroying their careers and their families.
That's good. Chief, as I get ready to close out this segment with you, I do want to, as we got pastors on the line, we got also, people that are watching this show as well. What is some information briefly that you can give that can help enlighten us when it concerns the police department, maybe how we should handle things? What are some, and some of pastors, that are watching, what are some things that they can be prepared for, as they're transitioning with this COVID-19?
Man, I would advise every pastor just to get to know the commander of the area where you are, where your church is, where your homes are, and let your members get to know some of the police officers and find a way to incorporate the police who work and serve in that area into, if not your church services, things that you're doing. And when that happens and you begin to know those police officers and those commanders and vice versa, you'll find that we have so much more in common than we have that's opposite. We have so many things that we agree on and so many things that we want to work together on, but a lot of times it takes somebody to initiate it. We should be initiated, but in the absence of police initiating it, the faith leaders of our community really need to find a way to allow their police to come in and be part of what they're doing. When we come around, people expect us to provide security and to protect them. I believe that when we come around, we ought to be worshiping with you. We ought to be giving away food with you. We ought to be cleaning the streets and cutting the grass and all of that. So if you can find a way to incorporate that into what you're already doing, I think you're going to find police-community relations will begin to improve everywhere. Those are things that we're doing in Baltimore. Those are things I did in New Orleans. And as much as pastors are doing a lot, I'm trying to do my part too. But I love when I get invited to go to a church. You heard Pastor Jackson. He and I remembered each other from a church service we were at because the pastor there was my good friend who invited me. Although I was not a member, he invited me to that service. But I always brought other police officers there too. So those are just a couple of little things because we really have more in common than you think, and we want the same things. And you'll find out that the police are here to serve and protect, but we're really misunderstood. Give us a chance to show you who we are. Give us a chance to show you why we're here and what we're supposed to do and what we need from you and how we can make it work.
Wow, that's awesome. Listen, thank you so much for your time. I do value that. If you're able to stay on and come back, answer questions, because at this time I'm going to even forego a commercial break because I do want to try my best to stay within an hour, maybe go a few minutes over. But I think this is some vital information that you have given us on tonight and given us that sneak peek behind the scene that the officers are struggling too. They're struggling with their mental health, struggling with coming to work, and also as a chief, how you're balancing and managing all that. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time out to be a part of that. So listen, you all, don't go nowhere. We're going to stay right here with you all. I'm going to ask the chief to go backstage. If he can stay on and come back in a few minutes, take a couple of your questions. We will do that on tonight. But I want to thank him again. So listen, share this broadcast. Make sure that you're telling somebody, hey, it's on right now, on tonight. Thank you so much, Chief. Listen, we're getting ready to go. Come on right back to Louisiana, to my good friend and brother. He's a preacher's preacher, awesome man of God, character and integrity. I've had the privilege of knowing him, to be honest, since I was about 11 or 12 years old, before when I was just a musician. And I even talk about that time I applied to be his minister of music and he wouldn't hire me, but that's all right. I'll get him back for that later. But he had the opportunity to run revival for me 2 years and the church in Shreveport, and the people were truly, truly blessed. So I'm excited to have him on, my friend and my brother. Can you help me welcome Dr. Ricky Carter from the Good Hope Baptist Church, all the way from Lafayette, Louisiana. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, man. Thank you for the invitation. I guess you chose tonight to get me back for hiring me as a minister of music.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, man, tell us a little bit about Dr. Ricky Carter and the good things that you're doing in the city of Lafayette, the Good Hope Baptist Church.
Well, man, listen, God is still good and he's blessing us. This is my 28th year here at the Good Hope Church. I've been in ministry 38 years and I've been pastoring 37 of those 38 years, but never have I pastored during a pandemic like we're faced now. There's an author, that I read sometimes, Lawrence Richardson. He has a book that's entitled Leading While Bleeding. And that's where I am during this pandemic. I listened to the other speakers and other pastors, and they talked about, their families and their homes, but being single and being, yet social distancing and being home alone, you find yourself wondering about the future of the church. And so what we've done, we've continued to do ministry, and I've always felt that we can do more together. So we partnered with some other pastors and other churches and other organizations. And I also serve as the president of our Senior Pastoral Alliance here in Southwest Louisiana. And we partnered with them, and we do things like we call the Kingdom Hall meeting, where every Wednesday at 12 noon, we talk about issues in our community. Next week, we'll be dealing with what about our people who are being called back to work when they are getting more money from unemployment than they get when they go on the job site. So do I go to work or do I continue to, get this unemployment until it runs out? And so we're dealing with that. We're also partnering with one of the hospitals here where we'll, in a couple of weeks, we'll be starting to provide free testing for our people for the COVID. We're not only doing that, but we using Zoom to do our Sunday school. We're using all the social media, everything at our disposal to teach the word, to preach the word, because I believe in time like these, man, that the church is facing one of the challenges. And, Paul in Ephesians, he tells us that the church ought to function like a body. We ought to be fitted like a building, and then we ought to be faithful like a bride. And so we got to be faithful even in this pandemic. We got to continue to function, even though we're not together corporately, but yet each member of the body has his or her own function. And we've got to learn that. And so that's why we partner with so many other people to sow finances into that ministry, or to sow people, personalities into that, to help get things done throughout the entire city. And so we've done well. And one of the things that have really blessed me is that even in this time of this pandemic, that financially we are not hurting because people have been taught to support the ministry, and they know that we're doing ministry even beyond what they see on Sunday mornings and on Tuesdays, because Sunday mornings at 9:15, I'm on streaming the services, preaching and teaching. On Tuesdays from 12 to 1, and on Tuesday evening, they see us and they hear us. Jesus said, "My house shall be called the house of prayer." We are praying for the community and praying for people at 6 o'clock on Tuesday evenings and teaching the word. And so ministry doesn't stop just because we're not together in the building, because ministry goes beyond those boundaries. And that's what the Lord has blessed us to continue to do.
Now, thank you so much for that. Now, with that being said, with coming back into what we got going on right now with this pandemic and getting ministry and getting back into this, what are some things you've learned about you, number one, and your church? And what I mean by that is, I was on a call a couple weeks ago, and a pastor was there with Dr. Maurice Watson, and made the comment. He said, he was having his church open 7 days a week, and he realized he was making more money in the pandemic, and he had more people getting on the Zoom. And his point was, he realized some things he thought he needed, that he realized that he can use other methods to get that. So can you talk about that? What in his church you found out, you say, what, I found there's some stuff I've been doing, I need to stop it, or there's some things that I haven't been doing, I should be doing. Talk to that for us.
Brother Ken, one of the things that I've learned about me, and a lot of us pastors have learned, and that is, and I've been practicing this for years, but it really showed me now that being a good steward over everything that God has given you. Because, man, I've done as many as 45 revivals in a year. I've spent more time in hotels than I have home. And now, not to have any preaching engagements, no Sunday afternoons. And you realize, what, man, the money that I could have been getting with the honorariums that I'm not getting now, if I had not been a good steward, I would be in a very, very dark place. But because my dad, who had a third grade education, he taught me, son, if you make a quarter, at least save a dime of it. And so I've learned to be a good steward over everything. And so what I've learned is that there's a difference between you being a pastor and wearing the title. See, some wear the title but don't fulfill the task. Those guys who have not fulfilled the task, they are filling it in time like these, because they have not taught the church to support the church with their presence, with their prayers, with their pockets, and so the giving is no problem. The next thing that I learned about myself is that we have to spend more time with the sheep. And that is, you said it earlier, we got to smell like sheep. The third thing that I learned during this pandemic, and that is that we have to spend more time with God in prayer. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And there's too many preachers are cloning their churches behind other churches rather than spending time with God, seeking God for wisdom. James said, if a man lack wisdom, let him ask God. See, just because it works for Morning Star and Theron Jackson doesn't mean it's going to work for Ricky Carter and Good Hope. Bond talking about the church in Mississippi meeting in the classrooms. Well, you've got to spend time before God so God can speak to you about what is it he wants you to do with you and your people. And so, and I've learned that there's a difference between having a vision and being illusional. And some guys see, when God gives vision, he make provisions. But when a guy is when it's an illusion, then God is not obligated to move on that behalf because he didn't promise that. But when he gives vision, he's obligated to move on your behalf.
Wow, man, that's that's blessed me. That's blessed me, and I'm glad you talked about that because since I got you on, I like you. You're somewhat like me. We like to be messy from time to time in a fun way. And I played 2 weeks ago a clip on my show from Dr. Tolan Morgan, and we talked about this pandemic is exposing some people that they really don't know the book,
right?
And they're not in the book. And can you talk about that? Encourage some pastor because some of them they think this is a break. They use it as chill out time, and I want to go back to what Dr. Theron Jackson talked about. He said, "Man, in this pandemic, I've been busy more during this pandemic than I was before."
Really?
And so talk about that. What is the importance of staying in the book, making sure that you are studying your craft, knowing what you're doing. It's good to have the eisegesis, the exegesis, but right now you need to know what's in the book. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, see, that's the thing that I have always had an issue with. And that is, Buns said it, you said it, that we've turned the pulpit to a platform. A platform is for entertainment. And so many preachers are into the craft and the art of preaching, where they work on the sound, but they never spend time with God to get substance. See, it's teaching that you need for sheep. Preaching is for sinners, because Paul said it's from the foolishness of preaching that sinners are saved. So you got to preach to sinners to get them saved, but you got to teach saints to get them to grow and to mature. And what we're doing is people are matriculating, but they're not maturing. They boast about how long they've been a part of the local church. But the truth of the matter is how many of them have matured where they can lead in the local church. And so we've got to spend time teaching. I spend more time teaching than I do hooping, because it is the information that transforms lives, not the inspiration. And what we've got to learn is that now that we can't hide behind people shouting and people hollering, amen. We can't hide behind turn to your neighbor, shake your neighbor's hand, rock them and shake them and rock them. People, we're the only one in the pulpit now. We're the only one in the sanctuary other than the media team and the musician. And we've got to stand there and we got to rightly divide that word, because people are hungry. People are hurting and people need help. And I believe in times like these that the church ought to cry loud. Because why? The Lord did not empower our sororities. He did not empower our fraternity. He did not empower the government. God empowered the church to transform the world. And that's what he done for us, man. He called us out of the world, placed a gift in us, and sent us back to the world, that the world may be transformed by him, but through us, by teaching and preaching the word of God. And that's why we got to open the book and rightly divide the, because it's not about who has the largest congregation, because all of us in the same situation now. It is about reaching the lost at any cost and then feeding the sheep.
And I think that's critical in this season, that we understand the importance of teaching the people of God. And you hit the nail on the head right there. And I think that's important. And so when you in doing that, what have you found during this pandemic that could possibly be some challenges? And what are some things you found out that could be a blessing during this pandemic? Because one of my mentors, Dr. Ari Vernon, says, never waste a good storm. And so right. I believe it's something in the storm that we all can learn and grow from. But talk about some of the challenges and talk about some of the blessings.
Well, some of the challenges now is doing ministry in a different way. See, I am traditional as they come. I'm not contemporary. I am traditional. I don't apologize for that, But give me a hymn. You can leave all that other stuff alone. Give me Amazing Grace and guide me over that great Jehovah. I'm good.
Listen, I understand you, Doc. I just knew you was gonna come on tonight with a 3-piece suit, Doc.
I'm uncomfortable as I can be. Trust me. And the only reason I'm dressed like this is because of Sam. Sam told me, Pastor, it's virtual, so don't dress up. Because I had on the black suit, Doc. A challenge is that we've got to learn to be prayerful and think out of the box. What has God called you to do, and what is God leading you to do? And now you've got to sit there and think about, what methods am I going to use to bring it to fruition? The challenge is that we not only have that struggle on our hand as it relates to doing ministry, but how do you do ministry with people that you cannot bring together and meet with them face to face? So it goes back to you using every gift that God, see, everything that the church ever needed, God has already provided. See, God is not a post God. He's pre. God don't wait till the church face a pandemic and then give the church what they need. The church already have what she needs. So every gift that the church need to fulfill what God have called the church to do, we have it. What have hurt the black church is people have not discovered their gifts. They have not developed in their gifts, and they're not willing to demonstrate that gift. And now during this time, those of us who know what we've been anointed to do and call of God to do, we've got to display that gift. It's not about us. It is about God, because that gift does two things. It's going to edify the body, but it's going to also glorify God. And that's why most of the gifts of the Spirit is not for the sanctuary anyway, man. Most of the gifts is for outside of the church house, the building. And people have got to be taught how to operate in their gifts, because wherever I am and I'm operating in that gift, I'm doing ministry. And I don't always have to attach Good Hope Baptist Church to it, because if I'm doing what I've been anointed to do, then it's about bringing glory to God, not about glory to me or glory to Good Hope Baptist Church.
That's good. That's good, and that's powerful right there. Making sure that what we're doing, that God gets the glory out of everything. And as I bring this segment to a close, because I'm gonna bring everybody back and let you all give some parting comments there. But what are 2 or 3 things that every pastor should be saying to his people on this Sunday? And just before you answer that, I do want to share with the audience, listen, we're going to bring it back on. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions on tonight, because I do want to honor these gentlemen's time on tonight. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the comment box, and we'll make sure we can try our best to get to them. But yes, share with us, what are 2 or 3 things that every pastor should be, and let me say why I asked that question, because I think we should all have a unified voice. And I'm not talking about preaching. I'm talking about, you know, it could be social justice. It could be to this pandemic. What is 2 or 3 things that every pastor should be saying to his people on this Sunday and every week?
Several things we need to share with them. That the virus is just as effective today as it was in March. See, people are returning back to normalcy. You cannot return to normalcy without making some adjustments, because there is no such thing as normalcy, because things are totally different. And people are walking around, especially our people, with no mask. Our people are still congregating for children's birthday parties, for graduation dinners. They're not practicing social distance. That's the first thing we need to get them to understand is respect life. Your life, others' life, respect life. The second thing that we have to get them to understand is this: be good stewards of everything that you have, because we do not know how long this pandemic is going to last. Prioritize. When the stimulus checks came out, you couldn't even find a television in Walmart. Why in the Gehenna would you go buy a television and can't pay your utility bill? See,
Reverend.
People got to be taught. I've got to prioritize. My family need to eat, but I don't need a 6-inch flat screen television. The next thing is that we got to understand that God is in charge, that everything that is going on, God is aware of it. He's able to sustain us. And I believe that he's waiting for the church to step forward and speak out to let people know that God is still good and that he's sovereign and that God is going to see us through this and give people hope. They cannot continue to trust in the stimulus. They cannot continue to trust in unemployment. They cannot continue to trust. See, everything that we trusted in, and Bond said it earlier. See, everything that we're trusting in, God have shown us that we ought not be trusting in it because it has failed. Our finances are fractured. Our family members are dying. Our friends have deserted us. Our jobs have laid us off. The church, we can't even gather anymore. But what's the common denominator? God is with us. And if we turn to God and trust him, God will protect you. God will provide for you, and he is forever present with you. That's what we need to give the people, that he's hope. And those who are not born again, they need to be introduced to Jesus because they need man, if it's hard for people with God, can you imagine the people who are trying to live without him? And so we got to make sure you properly introduce Jesus Sunday. That's what I'll sum it up with. Make sure you properly introduce Jesus.
Man, listen, that's some good information right there, Doc. And I'm glad you said it because it needs to be said. We got to prioritize in the season. We got to be good stewards because that's also what this pandemic is, our lack of stewardship.
Yes.
And my prayer is for every church that they have been practicing good stewardship. So listen, you all, right now, this time, I'm going to bring everybody back on. I'm going to bring Pastor Charles Bond back on, Pastor Theron Jackson, and Chief Michael Harrison back. And guys, one of the questions that was in the comment box, and I'll come to you, Theron, and then we'll go to Chief Michael Harrison. With everything that's going on, how do you manage to do what you do without burning out? Then we'll come to you, and then we'll come to you, Chief.
I would say, Ken, that there's a few things. I'd say there is identification. You got to know who you are, okay? But then not only is there identification, I think there's also organization. You got to know why you're doing what you're doing. And most importantly, there's delegation. You can't do it all by yourself, okay? So I think that the extent to which you don't lose your mind is when you share the work. God has not called us to be supermen or to do it all. Jesus says to the disciples, let's come apart. He said, and rest a while. It was Al Patterson who said that Jesus tells the disciples, let's come apart and rest a while, because he knows if they don't rest a while, they'll just come apart. And so at the end of the day, I think for me, real balance comes in not trying to be superficial, but know who I am. I have very real human boundaries. And if I don't get enough sleep, and if I don't eat right, I'm no good for any sheep to be a shepherd if I'm not taking care of myself. So I think trying to find a way to find that balance is important.
Chief.
First of all, I agree with Pastor Jackson. I told you, I'm going to go to work sounding real smart tomorrow after listening to y'all fellas, man. First of all, I realize who I am. I know me, and I know what my calling is, just like I'm sure you know what your calling is. And, you know, we have been, in good times, it's always about preparing for that day when you really got to go and do what you're called to do. Anybody can do it when it's easy. Anybody can do it when it's easy, but we're called to be here to navigate these waters through these times. And I'm not trying to do something different or more than what I know I'm supposed to do. I am here to do what I know to do, what I'm called to do, to lead these people through this time. And God has equipped me for it. And I've been preparing for it all my life, just like I'm sure you have. And so I'm not trying to be Superman, but I am trying to do what I'm supposed to do. And what I'm saying, and when you love what you're doing, when you fully understand your calling, when you fully understand your strengths and your limitations, you don't get tired, because you know when you've done enough for that day, and you know when you need to take a break. And Pastor Jackson just said it, you got to have good people and a good team of people to rely on, not necessarily to trust, but to rely on and to have confidence that they can get it done. Trust and reliance are very different, but you got to have those people who can carry it on, and you got to delegate to get it all done. And so knowing yourself what your strengths and limitations are, and knowing your calling, and knowing that you've been preparing for this, because this is what it's all about. It's not always about the easy times, but this is what it's all about.
That's good. Now, Pastor Bond, I'm gonna come to you and Dr. Carter, and don't close it out. I had a question for you all, because Chief Harrison kind of brought it up. We're talking about people taking care of yourself and being balanced and all these type of things. But during this pandemic, what have you discovered? Because we talk about this balance and sharing the load with leadership. And I had the priest be on the call, and one of the pastors, I think it was E. Dewey Smith, said that he discovered that, hey, he found out he was carrying some people during this pandemic, that he said, I was carrying some people and realized that they couldn't fulfill the task, and they have grown as far as they could go. And so, Pastor Bond, I'll come to you first, and then Dr. Carter. Talk about, the importance of leadership and having a good support system and team for pastors during this season.
Well, thank you. Let me just first say, and I know this is a very serious moment, but Dr. Ricky Carter didn't call my name, so I feel like I done made it. So that's the first thing I got to say, Doc. Anyway, in order to be to maximize what God has placed in us as leaders, and I thank all these wonderful, amazing men who are on here tonight, we must use the wisdom of surrounding ourselves with people who can hold up our arms. Stop, like you said, take off your cape, get rid of that you got to save the day mentality, and understand that you got to do your part. Listen, have the confidence. Let me just say this as well. Have the confidence that first you are a preacher. Out of all the things God could have made his son, he made him a preacher. He could have made him a lawyer, but he made him a preacher. He could have made his son a doctor, a lawyer, but he made him a preacher. And while preaching, he was a doctor and a lawyer. My point is have confidence that you're a preacher. And lastly, I'll say this. There were a lot of misnomers about people saying these preachers don't want to close their churches because they scared they're going to miss the money. It wasn't about money for us, because we don't preach for a living. We live to preach. It was about the fact that we missed the fellowship of the saints. I got an older congregation. Sunday was the only time they saw their friends and got together. So it was about the fellowship of the saints. It wasn't about us worrying about missing offerings and stuff like that, because God has prospered us, many of us, in the pandemic. Heck, I didn't gain weight in a pandemic. And so I lastly say, we must remember that we must surround ourselves with people, watch this, who can hold up our arms. Lastly, Pastor, in order to use this wisdom, partner with like Chief said, let's partner. For too many times, what has happened with the younger preacher, no insult, no pun intended, they became platform opportunists. We became competitor. It became very competitive and less camaraderie. And then thirdly, there was no real authenticity. Salvation ain't about what you got on. It's about what you got in. So gone are the days of walking around the convention wearing your suit and your gaiters and all that. I had to give away all my gaiters. Now you got to put on you some tennis shoes and get out here in some jogging pants, and you got to help your people, because the truth of the matter is that those of us who really understand what this is all about, understand that God has removed our advantages. You ain't got an organ no more. You ain't got all the way you have it, but it's not as important as it once was. But preach just as hard. From your laptop, from your phone, preach just as hard, because somebody still needs to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. I digress.
That's good. And Pastor Carter, I'm coming to you right now, and I kind of want to, if I could, shift this a little bit with that. I still want you to talk about the leadership, but talk about giving everything you got. I remember you preached a sermon, this was years ago, that blessed me, and you taught me how to, when you're preaching, make sure you give it everything you got, because you're not promised to get back to the place you're standing again. And that's one of the things, I remember a lady, she joined my church because she walked up and wasn't nobody but me, and then on Wednesday night, and I had took a text, sung my own hymn, and I was preaching, and she thought it was a bunch of people that only discovered was nobody but me. And so talk about how that during this pandemic, you know, and I want you to touch on that leadership piece too, but also talk about how it's important you don't shortcut the people because of the pandemic. If anything, you need to give it everything you got because you ain't promised to get back to the house after this pandemic is over. Talk about that, sir.
Brother King, years ago, Pastor Terry Anderson, Lily Grove Baptist Church of Houston, Texas, made this observation in a sermon. He said that he had gone to Angola one year to preach. And when he went into the chapel, there was a chair sitting over to the right, draped in black. And he asked the warden, why was that chair sitting over there draped in black? And the warden responded and said to him, Reverend, the man that sits in that chair tonight is on death row. And the last sermon that he hear preach is coming from you. You got to give it your best because when you stand up, you have to understand that everybody is on death row. We just don't know the day that we've got the answer. And it could be the last sermon they hear preached, and it could be the last sermon that you will preach. I'm a country boy. I'm from Pike County, Mississippi. My daddy taught me a lesson. He said, boy, never call the cattle from the field without giving them something. Sheep come to eat. You slop hogs, but you feed sheep. And I believe that's why some churches are struggling because the pastor is not a good spiritual dietitian. He don't know how to serve a well-balanced meal. You got to know how to serve that meal. And that's why we got to give it our best because you don't know when it's your last time. And as it relates to leadership, Pastor Buns, Pastor Jackson, they shared it. See, I made this mistake when I was a very young pastor because I started pastoring at 19. I looked for people who loved me. I didn't look for people who was anointed because I felt if they loved me, they would do what I say and they'll follow my leadership. But I discovered that I had people who was following me, but they wasn't walking in obedience to God. And so when it came time to do ministry and had to go to battle, I'm fighting with soldiers who should have been cheerleaders. And you don't take cheerleaders to battle. You take soldiers to battle. And what young pastors do, that's why young pastors don't stay at churches, because they're not prepared for battle, because they want everybody to like them. Everybody with you is not for you. You got to be able to take people who are anointed to do what you need done, even when they don't agree with you. You could be on my finance committee and we don't even agree on the budget. But they know that they're mature enough that the pastor have the final word. And when I ask them for their professional opinion, share it with me. But when I tell you this is what God wants and this is what God says, they say, yes, pastor. Even when they don't understand it, they say, because you're the one that got to give an account to God, and you're the one that God has placed to be our pastor, and I'm going to follow your leadership. Stop getting people who you think love you, because they'll love you today and leave you tomorrow. But if people are anointed, give them, let them operate in their assignment, and you'll get a lot of ministry accomplished.
Wow, man! Listen, y'all. We got to get out of here because I do want to respect, especially the chief. He's an hour ahead of us. I'm going to give each and every one of you some parting shots. Take about 1 minute, guys. And Pastor Carter, I'm gonna close with you on tonight. I'm gonna start with you, Chief. Then Pastor Theron Jackson, Pastor Bond, and then Dr. Carter. Once you get through, I'm gonna bring you up, and we're gonna have a word of prayer. We're gonna get out of here. So give us some encouraging words that you can share with the people as we lead the show on tonight. Chief, we in your hands, sir.
Well, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure being on with all of you. Ken, I love you. I think God has us here, man, to show us that some of that stuff we thought was important, it just ain't important, man. And all those things we thought we needed, we actually don't need. And we can think out of the box, but it's about being prepared. And you got to be prepared for what could come, just like this thing came upon us. Some people were prepared and are doing somewhat okay. Some people are taking a little longer to kind of catch up. And we got to think about doing things differently and be open to it. I've had to totally do things differently. And as I talk to chiefs around the country, man, the whole thing is changing and has changed. And so some of those things we're just not going to go back to because we found we can be more efficient and more effective even when we're not together. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to be better, for us to be smarter, for us to be more efficient, and for us to just do away with all those superficial things that you've heard some of the preachers talk about that people look at that don't really matter, because what matters is what's on the inside. And this is really showing who the real people are, who the real faithful are, who has good hearts, who has a good heart, who has good intentions, and who the phony people are. And it's exposing a lot of people. And I think we ought to just use this as an opportunity to get better. Thank you for having me.
Man, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chief. TJ.
Yeah, I thank you, brother, for this opportunity. You can. I appreciate being just with the brothers tonight. There's an old fella, Ricky. You appreciate this from being in the country, who had a mule, and he took him up to the Kentucky Derby and entered him into the Kentucky Derby, and the people were laughing because they said, "Man, you know that mule can't win." He said, "No, I know he can't win. I just like him to keep good company." So I felt tonight that I was just blessed to be in good company with you all. So thank you so much for having me tonight. But I will say this: don't waste this season. I think maybe God has given us this time to understand the significance of Sabbath. We sometimes spend so much time doing things for God that we don't spend time with God. And I think that as God has pressed this pause button, that we got to understand that there's a significance in the Sabbath, that God has created this space and time, perhaps for us. And I want to share with everybody, not just people listening, but to those pastors who may be paying attention to this as well. Don't just go through this season, grow through this season. Because when you go through, you just waste time. But when you grow through, it's an investment of time. So I want to just suggest to you all that as you're going through, be growing through. Because when it's all over, you will have either gone through or grown through. See, when you have gone through, you end up with a story. But when you've grown through, you end up with a testimony. So don't just leave this with a story, leave this with a testimony. But in order to have that, you've got to grow through. Not just go through, so that when you've gone through, you will have grown through, and God will give you a testimony to share. That's going to be a blessing to somebody else. So thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pastor Jackson. Pastor Bond.
First of all, when all this is over, I'm bringing all y'all to preach. I'm even bringing the chief to preach. And don't say nothing you said in my church
man.
that y'all said on this thing tonight.
Hey, let me tell you something now. Don't sleep on the chief now. The chief can do it, man. He can do it, Doc. Doc, don't sleep on Chief.
This ain't no radio show.
5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, Doc, he'll turn it out, man. I'm telling you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Y'all to set the chair out for me. So, what I want to say in closing is, first, thank you for having us, Pastor Ken. What an amazing platform you've had. I've learned something tonight. I need you to show me how to do this. This is amazing. But I wanted to say 2 key things tonight, outside of thanking the other brothers for allowing me to even be on this platform. Number one, I want to say to every preacher and pastor, minister, person serving in the kingdom, don't get caught up in this season in comparisonitis. Do what God has called you to do, because you matter to somebody. Somebody said a little girl one day was walking along the seashore, and she was throwing these little sea things, the 5-star little things out back into the ocean so they wouldn't die, because they had washed up on shore, and there was so many of them. A man said, "Why are you throwing those starfish back out there in the ocean? It ain't gonna matter. It's too many of them." She said, "But to the one I threw back, it will." And so you matter to somebody. Don't get caught up into comparisonitis. The last thing I want to say, Pastor, and I wrote myself a note so I wouldn't forget it. God is so amazing, like Dr. Carter said, that he will prosper his people in the midst of a pandemic. Watch this, on a good night. And I've only been at this assignment 8 months. You couldn't have paid me the 6 months in, right smack dab in the middle of my installation, the day Dr. Frank E. Ray Sr. was supposed to preach and install me in this church, that my installation would get canceled, all my plans would be crashed. But here it is. On a good Wednesday night, I built up to maybe 75 good people on the inside the building. That's with babies, dogs, mice, cats, rats, unborn babies, and goldfish. But now we reaching upwards of 500 to 1,000 on Wednesday night. Pastors, preachers, ministers, use this opportunity. Those of you who are not tech savvy, get with these young people that know this stuff. They were born with technology. Let them set up your stuff. Do it with Kingdom Class. And listen, this is the time to bring your church compliant during this time out, during this fall season, to where we can minister and reach more people by way of these streams. Don't be afraid of it. Just get you some folk that know it. And remember, you're a preacher.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pastor Bond. Just before I bring Ricky Carter up, Dr. Carter, I'm gonna let him close us out with prayer. I want to, because when he prayed, I want to be done. I want to personally say thank you to everybody who tuned in on tonight. I don't know about you, but I was enlightened. I was blessed by everything I've heard on tonight. And I want to say personally and publicly to all of you, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this.
Thank you.
I'm glad we've had opportunity that we can don't have to be so myopic in our thinking, that we can reach people wherever they are in their homes, and we're using this platform to do that. And so I want to continue to encourage you. My last words to you is that don't lose faith and don't lose heart. If God made you a promise, he's going to fulfill it. This is not the season to quit. And God has been putting this on my spirit for the last 3 to 4 months. This is not the season to quit. Don't give up. Remember who God is, and remember the promise that God made you. And if you stand on God's word, he's faithful and he's just to fulfill everything that he's called to you in your life. And so I'm praying for you, and I love you so much. So listen, next week, I want you to join us. We've been serious, y'all, for the last 6 weeks. And next week will be my last show for a little while. We're going to come back next month, the middle of next month, and doing some different things. But next week, we're going to close out with a little laughter. So I want you all next week to make sure you tune in. Next week, we're going to be laughing through this pandemic. We got DP on, comedian Munchie, Brother Martin, and Sister Carissa Cooper. Listen, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be phenomenal. And so I want to make sure that next week that you tune in next week as we laugh through this pandemic. So as we get ready to close out, Dr. Carter, if you would give us an encouraging word, and when you get through this, pray us out, sir.
Okay. First of all, Brother Ken, Pastor Ken, I want to thank you for the work you're doing and have been doing for the kingdom. And thank you for having us on tonight. I keep looking down, not because I'm reading, but because I'm writing. I've got several pages of notes because these preachers have blessed me tonight. My daddy told me that God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I ought to listen more than I talk. So I want to thank you. I want to encourage you, brothers and sisters, all of you that's in ministry. I want to encourage you. Find out what God have anointed you to do and do it. If God anointed you to do it, do it. If you're a pastor, lead the church. Do what God have called you to do. Stay in your lane. If you know the word of God, teach it. And as Jeremiah said, God said, I know the plans that I have for you to prosper you. You can prosper right where you are if you obey God. Dr. Leroy Thompson said something to me, and I've never forgotten it. He said, boy, wherever God plant you, bloom. He said, even if God send you in a desert, you will bloom because God will provide the water. So wherever you've been, whether it's 75 members or 7,500, whether it's a metroplex, metropolitan, or the hood, or out in the woods, wherever God plant you, do what God have anointed you to do and trust him for the increase. Let's pray. God, our Father, how we thank you for this time together. Lord, how we thank you for these men of God, Lord, that share with us tonight. And we thank you for the host. We thank you for giving him this vision, Lord, and thank you for him including us. But Lord, I pray for every congregation that is open in your name, not just a building with a steeple, but Lord, I pray for the universal church, that we will preach Jesus Christ, him crucified, buried, and resurrected. And I pray, Lord, that men of God and women of God who engage in ministry, Lord, that we will find help because iron sharpen iron. And I pray, Lord, that somebody have been enlightened, encouraged, and edified and exhorted tonight to go back to the field, Lord, and keep toiling, knowing that it pays to serve Jesus Christ. And I pray, Lord, that as we go through this pandemic, that you meet every need of every congregation, and that you meet every need, Lord, of every man and every woman of God and those who work in ministry. And our God, we trust you because we know that we are more than conquerors through Jesus Christ our Lord. And since you are for us, we know that you are more than the world when the world is against us. So we thank you for victory because we're the conquerors and not the conquered. And we're the victors and not the victims. So we shout and we rejoice even in the midst of a pandemic because our faith looks up to thee. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, brother. Brother, y'all stay on just for a few moments. Hey, listen, as we close out, as you see across the bottom, if God puts in your heart, please sow into this ministry as we continue to bring programs such as this to you each and every week. I love each and every one of you. Until this time next week, God's blessings and God's grace and God's peace upon you.